Welcome to the Eastgate Podcast, where we have in-depth conversations about topics that we may not cover on Sunday morning. In this episode, we talk about the family model. Happy Friday, everybody. My name is Nate. I am the producer of this podcast.
Oh, hi.
You're here.
My name is Rob. I'm a pastor here. I was thinking that somebody had mentioned to me that in other podcasts, the host of the podcast introduces everybody that's there.
Oh,
well, I did. I used to do that in the intro.
And then it got redundant. Then we're saying this twice.
It got redundant, yeah. So
let's not mess with things. Let's just leave it as it is.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm the producer. No, I'm one of the pastors here of this podcast of Eastgate.
Oh gosh. We're getting off to a good start. I'm Blake. I'm the community pastor here at Eastgate.
Hi, I'm Tyler. I'm the worship pastor here at Eastgate.
Hi, I'm Annie. I'm the Kids Gate leader here at Eastgate.
I like having everybody introduce themselves so you can associate the voice with the person talking.
Oh, that makes sense.
So.
Could you describe us though, so that anybody who's just getting this on audio doesn't know what we look like?
Yes.
Like you could, mention my huge tuft of curly hair on the top of my head.
Rob's wearing a gray shirt. That should help everybody.
Rob doesn't look a day over 25.
Doesn't look a day over 85. You heard him, folks.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about the family model. So growing up, I think that was like one of the main things that was taught was a biblical family model where the husband is, kind of in the lead, and the wife serves the husband, and then the children are to obey the parents and respect them. So I wondering, is that biblical? Or is that more of what happened in the social sphere of the church and everything?
And the church,
and then I know too. There's I wasn't taught this growing up, but I was very aware of it. Was like the umbrella model, which we can explain that if we want.
Yeah, go ahead and describe it for us.
So the umbrella model is a big umbrella that is God, that is protects the husband's umbrella, which is a little bit smaller, which is underneath that, and then the husband is. Has the wife's umbrella under that. So it's like an umbrella of protection. But that would imply that there's holes in God's umbrella for us to have umbrellas underneath that.
Right. The other umbrellas are just useless. If you don't know the picture, it's kind of like one of those Russian doll things. The what do you call it? Russian eggs?
Russian dolls.
Okay, yeah.
They're little tiny, smaller ones.
Yeah, it just keeps on going smaller and smaller. But yeah, I agree with you, Nate, that what's the point of the other umbrellas underneath if there's nothing supposed to be falling on?
It also implies a degree of separation between women and God and children and God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, I was thinking too about like hierarchy and how we, like especially with during the Middle Ages, how we have inserted hierarchy into Christianity. I feel like this is a hierarchical thing. Is that biblical?
Well, we're getting to a big range of things here, and these are we're using blanket terminology. Is this biblical? Gosh, some people could say yes, and they can go and point to Scripture and say, here's what this Scripture says, and this is how I interpret it. Therefore, my position on this is biblical. But another person can come and interpret it a little differently, maybe contextualize it a little more robustly, and say, I don't know that some of the framework that we've developed especially within the evangelical church, but in a lot of church environments, I'm not convinced it is something that's a mandate. Yeah, we could say this is biblical in that it's in the Bible. Is it saying what we think it's saying? Is it demanding what we think it's demanding? Those are the big questions that are important to get to the bottom of, especially as we're seeing how our families can be developed. And I would say one of the things that Jesus told us early on was we're going to be able to determine what is God's intent by the fruit that it produces. And I would say that sometimes the fruit is questionable. Given 30 plus years of counseling with people, I would say that the fruit is often highly questionable. that comes from this. So I think it's an important topic to discuss. Annie, you had said something before the podcast started, kind of describing about like as a young family wanting to know. Can you repeat that? I can't remember how you worded it.
Yeah, I was just talking about how this has been on my mind as a new parent, of thinking about what a Christian family looked like in my head growing up, what my family looked like, and then wanting to know how to parse through that and figure out what to take into my parenting as we're building our family.
It's very insightful.
Kind of knowing like what are we called to in the Bible as parents.
Well, let me just ask you this. So if you're willing to do it, talk about your experience growing up. What did you observe? How was your family framed? If you're comfortable enough talking about that.
Yeah, I am. It was I don't know that we ever specifically outright said that there was a hierarchy and that my dad was above my mom, but that was certainly felt.
Okay.
My dad was very strict. It was very much you're expected to do these things in this way, and if you don't, then there are consequences, but the consequence was spanking.
Okay.
And so it was never...
There wasn't a list on the fridge, but everything was implied.
Sure. I mean, I think things were clearly stated you knew that there was a way to act, and you knew if you stepped out of those boundaries, then you were going to be corrected.
So growing up in a Christian household, was this emphasized as a biblical
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. I think about the proverb, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Spoil the child.
But also just that I do think that it was kind of stated that, my dad felt like it was his job to raise us up in a way that represented God well. Mm-hmm. And therefore, he felt that it was his job to be the discipline. Mm-hmm. And that was very much the emphasis, was to be the discipline. And in that same way, that God is a father and he's going to keep us on the right path through discipline.
Do you think your dad was just scared because there was 8 of y'all?
I would have been.
It could have been some of that.
We raised 4 kids, and Robbie and I were like, early on, we were like, okay, we have got to be united on this because they are going to take over this house. That's their goal. We could tell.
And it worked.
I think that may have led to why, as a young kid, it seemed more like my dad was the one leading that, in that my mom was likely very overwhelmed by the number of children and the work that had to be done.
So where do you fall? You have 8 brothers and... No, there are 8 of y'all total, right?
Yes.
And where did you fall in the ordering of that?
I have 5 older brothers and 2 younger.
So you were fairly young.
Yes.
Everything was pretty much established by the time you came... Okay.
Yeah.
But you're the only girl, though, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that made a difference as well.
Yeah. I'm sure my brothers could see the difference more than I could. I also just had the personality of, I didn't understand why my brothers kept getting in trouble. It felt very simple to me to just follow the rules.
I wish Janelle was in on this because she would have stories like that as well. Because I will be honest that I was so lenient with Janelle that,
well, she's the baby.
She was the baby because she's just a little girl. And Jessica, my oldest daughter, is still bitter over a time that she was doing dishes. She had chores to do. She was doing dishes, but I was looking at this little girl trying to do dishes. And I said, oh, you just go play. I'll take care of this. And Jessica's like,
no, we didn't have that. We had a spreadsheet chore chart on the fridge that told you each month the chores rotated.
Yeah.
And so everybody had a job, no matter what.
I think
which I'm not opposed to.
Yeah. Well, real quick, I want to get the temperature here. Tyler, would you be willing to talk about your household family growing up? Like how was it?
Sure. Yeah. So, it was very much like the umbrella thing. It was, the man was supposed to be the provider and have a good job and make sure that there's, a nice house and provide money for the family, and then the mom is supposed to be taking care of all the housework,
the domestic stuff.
Yeah, but I feel like in my adult life that has made me feel very self-conscious about money and not wanting to buy anything because I feel like, oh, if I buy this, we can't afford bills or whatever, and it's,
Well, there's wisdom in that, though. I mean, but I see what you're saying. I get I got you.
Robbie totally agrees with you.
Yeah, Robbie's on board.
Even working at, I used to work at Pineapple Willie's, and I would definitely make enough during the summer so that during the winter months when Pineapple Willie's was closed, we had enough. We could pay our bills and stuff. But even during that time, I felt like I was doing something wrong because I wasn't working, and I'm supposed to be working.
Gotcha.
Okay. And so I know that that's not, I know that that's not the right way to feel about it, but that it's so deeply ingrained that it's hard to shake that feeling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nate, what was your experience?
So I think my parents were newer Christians when they started having.
Did you say
kids.
New Earth? Newer. I'm sorry. Okay, newer. What kind of Christianity is that? I was just intrigued. The New Earth Christians, and then I thought, well, maybe that's creation story stuff. Wait, go ahead. I'm sorry.
They were newer Christians. So definitely whatever was going on at the time, they were trying to do, and I think that was the husband, what Tyler described. The husband have a job, provide for the family. The wife stays at home, takes care of the household. And in practice, in our family, I think they definitely tried to have that model early on. In practice, after 6 kids, I think it kind of fizzled out, and it didn't really work. Because by the end of it, both of my parents were working. Yeah, so.
So, I mean...
And your parents are still together, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Both Tyler and my parents have divorced.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting, too, that, that they made compromises eventually. My parents did not. My dad very much dug his heels in, despite the impact that it had on my mom. Now, she did still work, but she worked and also had to... take care of the house.
Right. Yeah.
Take care
I was
of the
thinking about in a modern day context, I would go far as saying with most families, this model doesn't really work if both parents are working. The mom would tend to have the most work put on her shoulders in that situation. I think.
If you look at it logically and fairly, it's certainly going to be falling largely on the wife in the partnership there. So Blake, you and I, I grew up in a Christian. So each person who's on this podcast right here grew up in a Christian home. I did as well. Now I will say, like with you guys, my parents divorced early on. I was 9 years old when they divorced. I grew up primarily with my mom. My dad was a traveling evangelist, so he was rarely around. Honestly, he was very rarely around before they separated. In that. One time he was around the house and I was trying to piece together. I'd seen this guy. I was trying to figure it out. And I finally said, well, who are you and where do you live? And of course, my older brother, Riley, slaps me up on the back of the head and says, he lives here, you dummy. And I was like, no, he doesn't. I haven't seen him. So he was.
I'm not the dumb one here.
Yeah. But so largely I grew up in a single parent home, which certainly throws a monkey wrench into the thing that we were describing earlier of what is presented as a biblical model. What about you? I knew you guys, your parents divorced early on, Blake.
Yeah, so I was 4 whenever they divorced. And I mainly, I would go and visit Dad every
All of y'all's parents have been divorced?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
Mine actually never divorced. They just separated, and my mom determined she was never going to remarry. Neither one of them ever remarried, because my mom believed her interpretation of what the scriptures say is that was forbidden for her. So
I was just feeling a little left out here, but
no, don't feel left out. That's a gift and a thing to be grateful for.
So my parents divorced whenever I was 4, and I think at one point it was every other week with my dad, and then it turned into every other weekend, and then he moved to Houston, and so it was mainly my mom. So I grew up with my grandparents a lot. Like my mom lived there for a while, and then even after she got her own place, my school was across the street from my grandparents' house, so I would go over there every day after school. My grandparents were still married, but just in Louisiana, in southern Louisiana, we were all Catholic, which is, whatever. But there was just a culture in the state. I imagine it's in a lot of places, but I mean, it was just a culture that men dominate and women do the household stuff and that kind of thing. But my mom worked. She had we had to have money, right? So she worked, and then she'd come home tired and that kind of stuff. So, but
there was still the expectation that she handle the domestic duties and stuff.
Well, I mean,
worked.
there was no choice. I mean, so we tried to do what we could, but no, there's just a culture in Louisiana that guys are the ones in charge, and women just kind of make sure the kids are all right, and any kind of family event or anything. I mean, wives were cooking and taking care of all that stuff, and the guys were watching NASCAR or football or whatever, and drinking beer and everything. But we were Catholic, so we could go and confess on Friday or Saturday, and everything was fine. So, but I mean, no. So I didn't grow up in like a Christian household like that. God was very much implied, like the sky is blue and God is real, the kind of thing.
Sure, more on a cultural level than on an actual experiential level.
Yeah, but I mean, we weren't like praying at the house or reading the Bible or anything.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. So the original question, I was just curious as to where everybody's coming from on this. The original question is, what is the biblical role of the family? Like, what is the biblical construct for things? Is there a hierarchy that the Bible is expecting for us? So this all is derived largely from Ephesians chapter 5, when Paul is instructing the church in Ephesus about various things. And so there's a couple things that I want to state right off the bat that we need to be very clear on, and that is the phrase spiritual head of the home is an unbiblical phrase. You hear it all the time. Heard both of you guys kind of mention something along those. Well, you were talking about provider and stuff, but you hear that term, the spiritual head of the home. That's an imported phrase. Paul makes a statement, the husband is head of the wife as Christ is head of the church. I want to get into that in a minute, but spiritual is an imported word. It never says that. It's implied. We say, well, that means he's the spirit, he has to be, they say it's implied. Those who interpret it that way will say, well, it's implied. It has to be the spiritual head of the home. But that's not actually what it says at all. In fact, one of the things that has always stuck with me, really surprised me, was that in studying Roman culture and Roman history, coming across the Roman household code and how what Paul says in Ephesians 5 and the Roman household code line up. I mean, like a mirror of each other. It's an exact match. And so I was perplexed by this because I was like, well, wait a minute. So there's a phrase that we use, the divine order for the household, God's divine order for the home. And it's that's that umbrella thing you're talking about. There's God with his leaky umbrella, and then the husband with his leaky umbrella, and all the way down. So I started thinking, so the divine order for the home, the Romans had it figured out, I guess. Like either the Romans had come upon something that God said, oh, I like this. Let's do this. This is my thing now, and I'll have Paul reinforce it, and it'll be perfect. Or somehow, the Romans intuited exactly what God wanted, and God put his stamp of approval on it somehow. Or Paul was saying something else that we need to try to get to the bottom of. That he was, because they line up so closely that, gosh, it's either that God absolutely agreed with the Romans, or that Paul is speaking into a system that the Romans had in place that he's trying to communicate the values of the gospel to. That is the place where I have landed. I feel like much of the New Testament, we don't give this nearly enough thought when we're reading the New Testament epistles, reminding ourselves that the early Christians who are writing these letters are oppressed people. They're suffering intense persecution. They're suspected by the culture around them. They've got to be very careful what they do and what they say. And most of what's written into these systems is written in such a way to help Christians be able to move within those systems without disrupting it and bringing more persecution down on themselves, but also expressing the values of the kingdom of God within those systems.
And so Paul would have intentionally been careful about his wording
100%
on writing to Christians,
yes,
because for fear of either himself, I don't know how much he would have been afraid of himself being persecuted by them. Obviously, you go to jail for it and everything like that. But also, if these letters were to be intercepted by Roman authorities, and it happened to be in some of his friends' households, because that's how churches were meeting.
Absolutely.
Then that whole household would be under Roman persecution or prosecution at that time.
Well, even if it wasn't a governmental persecution at that point, you'd still have the social.
Societal.
Yeah, the people around them are going to be targeting them. And
so Paul
so
is
much of what's
framing
written,
this in a way.
Absolutely. I believe. I say absolutely. That's not fair for me to say. I'm absolutely convinced that's what Paul is doing. He's using the Roman household code as a framework for him to then show us how we can navigate through that code, but bring the values of Christ into it. And so the places where it differs are the things that are supposed to stick out to us. The fact that Paul spends so much time talking to husbands about loving their wives, completely foreign to the Roman household code concept. That's not, what do you mean? Love? They didn't have marriages framed around love or things like that.
Property and business investments.
Absolutely. It's how this is going to, enrich the family and women didn't have a choice in those kinds of things. And so, this was profound what Paul was introducing into this, completely different dynamic that shifts the entire thing away from hierarchical control and into something that has to do with interacting in a way that is mutually beneficial. It's a masterpiece. What Paul does in Ephesians 5 is nothing short of a masterpiece in subversive writing that uses the framework of something that could be oppressive and just through the terminology that it uses undermines the entire thing and brings it all to a level footing.
So the hierarchy situation, husband and wife, and so on and so forth. In Paul's time and times before then, it was kind of always that way. Women were used as property or business investment or family.
Yes,
I guess nobility and that kind of thing. And so the thing is if we get back to Genesis with Adam and Eve, God did not have a hierarchy with Adam and Eve so one of my favorite.
Yeah, I was just about to ask about that.
Yeah, so one of my favorite verses that I go back to with this is whenever God says that he's going to make a helper for Adam. Mm-hmm. And that word helper, forgot it in the Hebrew, but either way, it's used another time
I forgot it too.
You're going to remember while I'm talking.
Yeah.
So it was used one other time, but it was describing.
No, it's used multiple times.
But it was using that term for God as helping.
Oftentimes as God. Sometimes other nations that were coming, it's rescuing helper. Yes.
Right. So since the fall, we've entered into this hierarchy, which is not necessarily God's original plan.
So if we want to look at a hierarchy model that's biblical, here it is. He says to the woman, I will sharpen your pain in pregnancy. This is after the fall, and this is the curse that results from it. And in pain you'll give birth. You will have desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you. So there's hierarchy.
That's the result of the fall.
It's the result of sin entering into the world. It is, and I think we can all be in agreement that what Jesus has come to do is to undo the effects of the fall.
Amen.
And to rescue us from the consequence of sin. This hierarchy is a consequence. I will live and die on that reality.
So if we're going to move to a more biblical viewpoint of family structure and those type of things, we would want to get to Genesis 2 instead
Genesis
of
1.
Genesis
the end of
1
Genesis 1. At the end of Genesis 1, he said he made them male and female. And then he gives them this commission, and there's no distinction between the two of them. And he doesn't say to the male, you're going to do this, and she's going to wash the dishes afterwards, or anything like that. He just says, you guys are going to rule over creation, all the creepy crawlies and the critters and the birds and this guy, all this stuff. And they both are doing this as co-equal regents, representing. They're both image bearers of God. That was the original intent. The fall disrupts that. And everything then that we're trying to impose a hierarchy on is reading everything through the lens of Genesis 3, as opposed to going all the way back to Genesis 1 and understanding the true existential nature of what human beings are.
So I'll talk a bit about just my experience on doing it wrong and getting back to Genesis 1 type of type of life with my wife, and how that's been beneficial. So for a while, I was pretty convinced that I needed to be the head of the household and all this other stuff, and I had convinced Gwen that she needed to not work and that I would work and provide and do all the things, and so it just turned into a lot of burnout on her part. I was just very much I had the mindset of just coming home and I done worked all day, and she hadn't done anything, even though she's been working all day. I just can't see it.
Just working on kids. What is that?
Yeah,
That's nothing.
Yeah. And the house is clean, the food's cooked, and and so it put a lot of pressure on me, but a lot of pressure on her to live as people that we were not supposed to be living as. She's way smarter than me on a lot of things, and I was trying to take care of those type of things that I was not designed. God did not design me to live that way or to do that.
We can see that. Just kidding.
But and so we've since moved away from that and moved to a much more
but see that, and that's the thing. So Annie, you were talking about like what's the right model for a Christian home? What are we supposed to do? And my thinking is whatever's going to work for you, whatever is going to work towards righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. That's the stuff of the kingdom of God. Whatever's going to lead you into the flourishing of life. And that may look like a very traditional situation, and that may and people have and do function in that wonderfully, and that's great. But gosh, we're in a very broken world and a very difficult society to live in right now, especially when it comes to financial, economic issues. To have a single parent, single income family, that's a tough call. That's not everybody's going to be able to do that or pull that off. And if you can't, then man, there's all these new tensions that begin to develop in the whole thing that I think are unnecessary. And I know that in the crazy, I'm sorry, if you're going to start, I want to hear.
I was just going to say exactly that we have to be careful to not shame other people who do find their purpose in that, because it's about what works for you in your relationship, but there has to be that communication and there has to be that understanding there.
Absolutely. And I still would say that if we're looking for biblical, we would not reinforce hierarchies. So that even if we fall into traditional patterns where the husband's making a lot of the decisions or whatever, his role, according to Paul, is still to be doing any of that stuff out of love for his wife. And that implies that mutual submission, that mutual concern for each other, and working to build each other up and provide for well-being that way on an equal level.
There has to be a submissive heart on both parts.
Both parts, absolutely. And that's what Ephesians 5, begins its framework that way in verse 21, with submit to one another in the fear of the Lord.
And that's the thing, is that both husband and wife, and then can be taught to kids through example, is servanthood in the household.
Yes.
If kids are seeing mom and dad trying their best to serve the other in the best capacity that they can, or at least making the attempt to, that's going to pick up on the kids are going to see that, because they don't listen to our words as much as they see our actions.
That's right.
And then that'll turn into the kids wanting to be having a servant heart as well. So
in the crazy church, we were highly reinforcing what we call the biblical model for the family, biblical divine order for the family, and husband and the head of the wife, all that kind of stuff. My personality doesn't work that. Again, I was raised in a single parent household, so I didn't have any kind of a frame of reference for any of this stuff. And there were pretty intense demands placed on us within the church community itself. I'm not going to call it a community, but whatever. Anyway, and so there were a lot of eyes watching how we were behaving or what we were doing. And so under that pressure, I thought, hey, I got to do this. I got to make sure I do it. And so in our system, it was clearly defined as whatever was the ideal in the 40s and 50s. The husband is a provider. He's the only one who works. He does all the bills. He does all of that. She does all the domestic things, takes care of the kids, da-da-da-da-da. So any of you guys know me, remedial is not even fair to say for math and
you're
numbers.
Starting to twitch talking about it.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to pay the bills, and it was a nightmare. I mean, I'd never balanced a checkbook in my life, still never have. I can't even remember the last time I wrote a check, to be honest, but that's part of the way things have changed monetarily around there. But I just didn't know how to do it. I would struggle for hours just trying to work with a calculator. Had to try to figure out how to use a calculator. I mean, I'm telling on myself. And I was just, oh man, we were bouncing checks and things were just, I was driving us into a hole. And I was genuinely praying, Lord, you've got to help me. You got to give me this wisdom that I'm supposed to have to be able to do this kind of thing.
I did give you the wisdom. She's sitting right over there.
That's exactly it. A thought popped into my head, and I really believe it was God directing me. And the thought was, your wife is a bookkeeper. She did this stuff for a living. And I was like, wait a minute. What if, like on the down low over here, I just kind of snuck this stuff over to her, and of course she was overjoyed and thrilled to take that and shoo me away, and I've never seen it since. But we have a lot of good things to show for that. So
you still get to eat, and you live in a house.
That's right. That's exactly right. So on a modest income for many, many years, she has done wonders with the resources that we have.
And so with all the pressure coming from the church that you were in.
So I had to keep that quiet.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't ever tell anybody that my wife does that. It would have been immediately, well, brother, what's wrong with you? Aren't you, just pray. And I was like, I did pray. And God was like, you're an idiot. So yeah. So it goes back to what's going to work. Like to me, as I'm looking at it, and this is just based on my experience with it, but I just think like work together as a team. Each spouse bring what giftings and abilities you have into that. And you say, well, neither one of us have anything. You got something somewhere. Yeah. I mean, if you functioned this far in life, bring those things and let each one carry the things that they're capable of carrying, and the others support them. And that's going to go back and forth on all kinds of stuff in life.
In that, I do feel like it's important, though, because of where we are culturally, women are prepared to run a household more than men are prepared.
Yeah.
And so in that, I just want to be careful, because you can say, I know that I have this issue just with myself of saying, well, I'm better at planning things. I'm better at cooking. Therefore, I can do all the grocery shopping. I can do all the cooking. I can do all the planning, this and that, and take on way more to make his life easy. Not that I'm making his life easy, because then I'm burnt out and stressed out.
Right.
But I have a hard time letting go of those things and letting him build those strengths as an adult.
So that would be the fight from a traditional female's perspective in the church of choosing to let those things go, and that would be a fight, because then I'd say somebody that grew up in that would then question their own self-worth. Well, again, not being able to.
But we got to go back into the idea of support. Lead and support, and so even if you have the gifting or the ability, so Robbie is the brains of our operation. I'm going to say in terms of our family, obviously. But I mean, in terms of being able to determine the right path for us financially, all of those kinds of things, I am terrible at it. Now, she's not on our own in that. So my whole role in that is to support. How do I support this? What do I do? How do I cooperate? What can I do to make this easier for you? What could you assign me to do that I can, alleviate some of that task so that it doesn't become an overwhelming burden for the areas where you're gifted and able. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It does. I think where it becomes a point of contention, I think early when you're building that relationship, is that it can then feel like I'm the manager and I'm, assigning things.
I got you.
But I think that that's part of building a marriage.
It is.
That you have to have those conversations of, I don't want to have to tell you to do this thing, but also I kind of have to, otherwise you're not going to necessarily know. And being able to sit down and relinquish that control and be able to see, I don't know, I think it comes down to that same thing of like not necessarily seeing each other as equals in that, of saying that like, oh no, I can't give that to him, I have to take that. And being able to relinquish that and build those building stones together without so that in 5 years I'm not having to tell him
right. That's
do
so
this,
good,
do
Annie.
that.
That's really good, and and very perceptive. And the key to all of that then comes down to communication and being willing to communicate and being willing to be vulnerable in that communication and even express. I remember early on when Robbie and I got, when we first had Jessica, and of course we were still in that context where I go off and work, and of course she's not doing anything. She's just got a newborn at home, so that's not a big deal. And I'm at work. I'm doing this, and that's So I come home and I'm expecting all these things. And at some point, she finally said to me, "Rob, I need help." She told me that from her side, she kept thinking I shouldn't have to tell him that I need help. There is a thing, look, and I don't want to get into all of that, but I mean,
guys are dumb.
We're dense in terms of some of these things, and it could be cultural programming. I don't know. I have no idea. I do know there are vast differences between males and females in perception and awareness and things like that. So, I didn't see it. I didn't recognize it, but because of the communication and the willingness, and because there is that love there, then it's like, oh, well, shoot, yeah, let me help. What do you need? What can I do here? And then after I've been trained, after I get trained and I know what I'm doing in these things, and I can take over. And now, gosh, there's a lot of things that I love to do on a domestic level that I never did before. I love cooking. Cooking is just like my jam.
And you weren't a big cleaner whenever you first met
not
Robbie,
at all.
And now
I was a full-on slob. In fact, I was roommates with my brother and another guy, and my room was so bad I would refuse to do laundry. And have you ever smelled clothes that just sit in a pile for long periods of time? It's phenomenal, man. That is a smell. And they put up they found a radioactive hazard sign. And they put it up on my door, and they would not let me open my door. Like I could go in and shut it real quick. And she married this. That's what's amazing. It's her fault. But I will say now, I am fastidious about stuff like, there's no way I could just walk away from my bed and not make it in the morning and stuff. That's a world apart, but that's because we grow together. This is over time, and it's fueled not because I'm thinking, well, I've got these jobs and that. It's fueled because I love her. I mean, it's the same with our walk with Christ, and that's why Paul uses that as this great example for how we grow in this relationship with Christ. It's out of mutual love, and we learn to walk His path, and it begins to change us. Things begin to be altered in our. I'm sorry, I'm just going on.
No, you're okay. I do want to say too that because I don't want it to seem like, oh, Tyler does nothing. We're like somehow I heard
Tyler, we've all been kind of eyeing you suspiciously now.
What I'm saying is that we found a balance as a married couple.
Yeah.
And then we had a kid.
And you'll find 1,000
now
more.
we have to find a new balance.
That's
and
right.
So
That's right.
it's growing in stages.
And that's wonderful. See, that's the whole adventure. It never gets to the point where, and I think if we ever got to that point of like, well, I know her and she knows me, and we don't have to, then where's the adventure in that? There's still things that you discover and learn about each other as you go along, and so that can keep going. I'm 43 years in, and I mean, I'm always, I don't know. That's dumb. I don't know.
And he's still learning math.
And I'm still learning math.
No, he's not. Now Gwen and I make the joke that we've been divorced and remarried thousands of times, and I mean but it's part of the growing. I mean, if if you look at that tree out there during the wintertime, it looks dead, and then it comes back to life during the spring. And we're gonna have those seasons in our lives as we're married. And you were talking about all of us are products of divorced families. Well, Gwen and I I remember whenever we found out that Jordan had autism, and both of us had already kind of made a determination, like, we're going to make this work. We're not going to get divorced. And then whenever we found out about Jordan and his autism, it said that 1 out of 5 families stay married.
Stay married.
4 out of 5 get divorced whenever they have autistic kids. And Gwen and I told her, I was like, we're going to be the one. Like, we're gonna make it. We're gonna figure this thing out. And we always have. And I mean, it's been really bad, and it's been really, really good. But you just keep moving through those things. But I think that part of that is a result of having divorced parents and growing up in that life and saying, man, I don't want my kids to have to grow in that. And, it can't work for everybody. That's part of what this model talks about. Like your mom just refused a divorce. It can put yourself into a dangerous situation. But if you have the ability to do it and can, then you can do this. And that's just a result of growing up. But don't let these situations put you into a dangerous situation either by rules, by saying, no, man, this has to be this way.
Making up blanket rules for every situation.
I'm willing to be wrong on this. I'm willing to be...
You're wrong.
Okay. I think that a big problem that stems from this model, or just the result of the fall, is this idea of masculinity, and from a male's perspective, like I gotta do this if I'm gonna be the man, and so we build up this whole thing on masculinity. But I heard a guy say the other day, and I really liked it a lot. He said, if your masculinity has to be propped up by a woman acting in a certain way and lauding you for being a man, then that's not real masculinity.
No, absolutely, I agree with that.
This model, the Roman model, does that. It props up masculine by all the help that he gets and all the support that he gets from his kids. The Roman model, from his wife, from his kids, and from everybody else, and from the society around him. But if you take all that away, is he still the strong man?
No, he wouldn't be, and that was the great fear, and that was the great threat that Christianity posed, is because they were being accused of undermining the Roman household code because of this sense of equality that was being represented there. And so, and that's what Paul is doing. So he's using that terminology of their code, but undermining it so that it doesn't become something where the husband is suddenly now the recipient of all of the glory or the benefits of it, and everybody else is subservient to it. He actually flips that in his wording of it. And then ascribing to Christ domestic duties. Like he says, as Christ is the head of her who cleanses and washes and cares, all of the things that would be normally associated with a woman's work, he applies to Christ and then says to husbands, now emulate this. In other words, recognize you're in this together. This is a co-mission that you have to carry the gospel through this culture.
So a Roman citizen at that time would see a Christian next door neighbor, for instance, a husband, if they were to see them cleaning laundry or washing some dishes after
there would have been
dinner.
A scandal. That would not have. You didn't do. I mean, he would have been mocked and ridiculed and looked at suspicious. They were already looked at suspicious. Like, they're not participating in the pagan rituals, oftentimes that were loaded with sexual practices. They weren't participating in that. And that's bringing the curse of the gods down on the whole society. These guys, man, they're a threat on every level. They're not doing that. The husband's acting like as if the wife is equal to him, and they go to some gathering where there's a woman who's leading it, and all of these slaves are leading it, and their masters are showing up with them. This is undermining the fabric of Roman society. We have got to stamp this out. We got to stop this nonsense, because women need to know their place, slaves need to know their place, children need to know their place, and if these guys get a foothold, it's going to ruin everything.
Wow.
And so Paul, with that in mind, is, again, brilliantly weaving his words through it so that he's using all the right framework, but he's undermining everything that it says and turning it on its head and resting the entire weight of it on mutual love and respect for each other.
That's fascinating. So we as Christians, just by our love for one another, can crack the foundations of the systems of this world.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that everybody has resisted from the time that Christianity was birthed. This notion that love could actually change this world, forget that. It's guns and bombs and guns are going to change this world. And the world stays in the broken cycle that it's in. And it requires brave Christians to renounce that way and hold fast to the love that first saved us.
That's awesome. I love that.
So pivoting to parenting.
Yes.
I've often heard the, spare the rod, spoil the child. What is what's the context for that?
Well,
context,
it's a proverb, and he's making it, it's instructions, I believe, in the context. I haven't looked it up recently, but I felt like it was in the context of a king. But even still, the idea The rod was representative not of like what you think in terms of a hickory switch or something like that. The rod of correction is the authority. The rod is like a scepter, the rod of correction. In other words, it doesn't necessarily demand corporal punishment. It means that authority. Have authoritative boundaries set for your children. Human beings, we want boundaries. We need them. And relationships require boundaries and all of that. My mom used to tell the story. She was a school teacher of a school that had a fence around their playground. And one day, someone was trying to progressively think, you know what? These kids need freedom. Let's take this fence down. We don't need a fence there for them. And when they took it down, the kids all just huddled in a mass in the middle of the playground. They were afraid to move out because there weren't clear indications of where the safety was. So it makes sense. So to me, that's my whole thing was like, our goal as parents is we're wanting to raise up children that are going to be good citizens in this country, and our desire and prayer for them is that they will also reflect the grace of God in a relationship with Him. But our main goal in this is raise children that are going to have a sense of, a sense of decency about them, and so that means we create boundaries. And I used to say to my kids, "Look, I'm creating this boundary for you." Because if you cross it, you still have somebody loving you on the other side of it. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to lose some privileges. That's, there's a consequence to that. When you leave this home and you cross boundaries out there, they're going to not care about you or love you, and they're going to throw you in jail. So let's learn it here in a safe environment, and then it becomes a practice. And there's a famous passage. Gosh, I'm terrible with remembering but it's Proverbs, and it's the very famous one. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. Terrible translation. Every decent scholar in the world says it's a terrible translation. It should never say that. It's the literal Hebrew is train up a child in his own way, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. But one scholar, I feel like, cracked the code of what, because that's a curious statement. Like, what does that mean? But he said, no, the way that the wording is put there, you could say, train a child to get his own way, and when he's old, he won't depart from that. He'll live with that expectation.
So it's opposite of what we've taken, we do all the time. Nate and I were talking about that with the scripture. So often in scripture, we take something and think that it means one thing. Yeah, and it actually means the complete opposite.
Yeah, so we had a whole like late 90s. I don't know, because your parents were parents in the 80s and 90s, right? And Nate Bagartzi talks about that. Like Christians from the 80s and 90s were the most Christian. Like even Jesus was like, okay, let's back off a little bit. So we were Christians. We were Christian parents in the 80s and 90s, and there was like a whole generation of kids who were walking away from the faith. And I had so many parents coming to me just weeping and just distraught. I did everything right. The Bible promised me. I train up a child in the ways of the Lord, the way he should go. When they're older, they wouldn't. And I'd be like, yeah, I get what you're saying there. And their story's not done, so don't stress too much. Pray for them and stuff. But the Bible actually never said that. It didn't say that. That's a false thing. And they know it. This is what kills me a little bit. It's known. The scholars know it. Everybody knows it. And the question that always emerges, why don't they change that? Like, why wouldn't they put a better translation in there? And the reason is because Bibles are produced by publishing companies, and publishing companies have a bottom line that they got to keep in mind, and that there's a lot of additional merchandise that goes along with verses like train up. There's calendars and posters and all kinds of stuff that would go along with that you would be undermining.
It's one of the saddest things I've ever heard.
It is pretty tragic. It's a very cynical way of looking at it. I don't know. I don't know the hearts of people or what they're doing, but it seems like a reasonable, because it is perplexing as to why that wouldn't be changed when pretty much every scholar universally says it's a terrible translation.
So say again the translation.
It should be train a child to get his own way, and when he's old, he'll always be expecting his own way. And that was the point I'm making before. So that's the idea, is that what we're supposed to do is create the boundaries so that as a human being, no human being lives autonomously. We have to operate within a society, within a community. And so that's our goal. Train children how to live in such a way that they can handle it if they don't get their own way. And that's probably the highest good that we can do. But in terms of how you're going to do that, look, I say just whatever's going to work. I mean, I don't believe there's any mandate from Scripture that you've got to employ corporal punishment. We started off with that mindset. You got to spank your kids, and that's the only way that works. I just never had the heart for that. I'd spank these kids, and I was a wreck afterwards. I'd be crying off in the corner and stuff. It was terrible. And last time the kids were all little, and they would usually get in trouble in bunches. And even if they weren't all guilty, I was going to punish them all anyway. And I was going down the line. I had a little ruler, and I was smacking their bottoms. They, standing there. And by the time I got to Janelle, I looked back, and Jessica was just laughing her head off. And they were all laughing. By the time I got to Janelle, I just bailed, and I just said, okay, this isn't going to work, because my heart isn't in this. This isn't helping anybody. And now they're just defying me openly. Yeah. So I decided, look, what are the things that are important to them right now? Like, they're into video games. Oh, okay. Well, I have control over that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do have that control. And again, this is a loving environment. I'm never going to inflict something on them just because I want to hurt them. The whole idea is to create these boundaries so that they understand that this is how life works. And so that's all.
I started out with Christian spanking, and I stopped pretty early on. And I learned that just sitting down and talking with him about what he did and the consequences that could happen from that, the experiences I've had doing those things, that went worlds further.
And, every child is going to be different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, not everybody's going to, so because somebody could be listening to that thinking, are you kidding me? I've tried to reason with my kid and they just hit me or whatever. So, I mean, everybody's got to find what's going to work. The bottom line is to be praying for ways to create enforceable boundaries.
Yeah.
And then determine which boundaries are the most important in any given situation.
And also that it comes from that place of love.
Correct.
And I think a lot of our discipline growing up as kids came from my dad's anger that we weren't being obedient.
Well, and every human being has got their own things that they're bringing into this, and they've got to wrestle their way through. But you've been able to learn from that and recognize that,
I think too that, I can see going back that, he did a little better than his dad did.
Sure.
And his dad did better than his dad did. And so, it's just that continuing that healing of, we're fallen people and, figuring out how to
navigate that way. Yeah. In ways that are beneficial. And that's, again, the other goal is that, enforceable boundaries, but also everything that we do is to lead towards the flourishing of life. And to reinforce that, to work in ways that are going to be best for each individual. And each individual kid is going to be different. My son Daniel, was this compliant. It's fascinating how that changed in his life as he hit his teen years. But as a child, compliant, sensitive, quiet. Bradley came along, and oh my gosh, I mean, it was just a tornado going through the house and stuff. And yet, roles reversed now. Daniel, well, not totally. Daniel, but they went through a period of time where the roles reversed. Like, Daniel was my wild child, and Bradley's this very straight-laced, very quiet, very, so it's curious.
And Janelle was always perfect and never gave you guys any trouble.
Now she's terrible. Yes. Causes trouble all the time.
Rob had a traumatized look in his eye whenever I said
I will say, too, that, because I'm friends with your children, so I've heard stories.
I'm sorry. No,
but I do know that, Jessica has talked about how, she was a very rebellious teen, and that one of the moments that broke through to her, not that she changed in that moment, but that has stuck with her, into her adulthood, was when she was sneaking out and got caught, and that you had sat her down and told her, listen, I know that you're going to keep sneaking out, but it's my job as your parent to stop you when I can. Essentially, to provide, like you're saying, to provide those boundaries. And that she felt in that moment a good deal of respect for you, of like acknowledging, okay, you're not trying to ruin my life. You're just doing what your job is.
Yeah, that's right. We both had a job description at that point.
Yes, exactly.
Hers is to try to sneak out. Mine is to try to stop her. And again, trying to. It's very difficult as you move through life to remember what it was like to be certain ages. And especially, as you hit your 30s and 40s, there's a phrase that my mother-in-law used to always say is you can't put a young head on old shoulders. And kids are going to react and do, and they oftentimes can't even help themselves in those situations. And to try to have grace and remember what it was like to be a teenager, to be a middle schooler and stuff. And
I think, too, sometimes we do remember, and then that causes panic.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yes. But I guess...
But kind of regulating your own emotions and processing through that instead of putting that on your kid to process.
Exactly. Trying to remember what it was like, and still create enforceable boundaries.
Yes, absolutely.
But also remember that this isn't, they're not actively trying to destroy you or anything like that.
Even if it feels like it.
Even if it feels like they're trying to take over the household. But
Gwen had to remind me because Christian would go and do things. He'd be like, "Yeah, I'm going with my friends or whatever," and I knew what I did whenever I said that I was going with my friends, and I'd be so concerned, and I'd be like, "Okay, I'd try and lay out everything. This might happen, and this might happen, and don't fall into this trap and this kind of stuff." And Gwen and him had to remind me, like, yeah, that's not you.
Yeah.
He's
and
not.
that's hard, though, but because I totally, I went through the same thing. I'm like, I knew what I was up to. Yeah. I knew the terrible stuff I was doing, and I don't want my kids to go through that. But you know what? Having gone through this now and come out the other side, I realized, it's an old Who song. The kids are all right. Like, we entrust them to God's ability to watch over them. That is greater than our ability to parent. Yep. Trust in His ability to hold them. And make sure that love is the bottom line, that there's always a safe place to land with you.
And God loves our kids way more than we do.
That's right.
That's a hard thing that I had to swallow. So getting back to the family model thing, just I'll try and make this brief. I do have a natural inclination. It's just in me to protect those around me, to protect my wife, kids, Eastgate, y'all. It's a thing that I have to fight a lot. God has to tell me, no, I'm God. You sit down and you let me do the protecting and that kind of thing. I do have a natural inclination to do that. And thinking about the umbrella model, is that supposed to represent protection, like God's protection, then husband protect the rest of the family?
I always thought it was supposed to be authority. Just the umbrella. I don't think the umbrella was meant to talk about holding rain back. I think it was.
Oh, okay. Because it looks like protection from the.
No, well,
rain.
I suppose it's implied protection, but the more prominent idea is that of authority. Umbrellas just be.
I got you.
Just end up being the easiest way to try to express the hierarchy.
Okay, got it.
But again, hierarchies. Just let's put hierarchies down.
Yeah, that's the ways of this world after sin.
That's correct.
Cool.
Well, thank you for that
So the
input.
biblical family model is that there is no one set model.
That's correct.
And that we can't impose a system without, denying the humanity of the people within that system.
No, very well put. I couldn't word it better myself, but I'll try. I'm just kidding.
Go for it.
No, I think that's
So the only model is
there's no blanket
love.
rule for how is it, but the bottom line is love and mutual servanthood, like serving one another out of love in order to build up and lead to the flourishing of life.
If you, the listener, have any questions or if there's something you want to learn more about, you can send us an email at egcfpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Bop.
Bop.
Oh, everybody wants to say it. It's hard not to say bop when you say bop.
So fun.
How about you count it down and we all say it at the same time?
Okay, here we go. 3, 2,
Bop.
1.
Bop. There it is.
Perfect.
Nate, you're just amazing. You do it all.